Now let's move on to make the second row with double crochet stitches. Take the first row you have made and mark the final stitch with a stitch marker. Put the hook back into the big loop. Pull the working yarn to adjust the loops to an appropriate size that fits on the hook. Put the working yarn back in your hand. Turn your piece over to the other side. Then make 3 chain stitches to form a turning chain. 1, 2, 3. For a row that will be made with double crochet stitches, usually you will need to make 3 chain stitches to form a turning chain. Sometimes a crochet pattern might call for a different number of chain stitches to make. In that case, you will follow the pattern's instruction. A pattern will also specify if this turning chain is counted as a stitch or not. Let's first look into the situation when a turning chain is considered a stitch. Let's put a stitch marker in the chain stitch on the top here because later when we crochet the third row, the final stitch will be made into this top chain stitch of the turning chain. If counting V shapes, the first 3 V shapes that are the closest to the hook represent the turning chain, and they will be counted as 1 stitch. The 4th V shape here, marked with a blue stitch marker, is the final stitch from the first row and the first stitch of the row to work into when making the second row. However, we will not make a double crochet stitch into here because the turning chain is viewed as the first double crochet stitch for the second row. So we will skip the first stitch of the row here and make the first real double crochet stitch into the second stitch of the row. Remove the stitch marker. Yarn over. Skip the first stitch of the row. Insert your hook into the second stitch of the row. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over again and pull through the remaining 2 loops on the hook. 1 stitch is made. Continue to make 1 double crochet stitch into each of the remaining stitches of the row. Now we've come to the end of the row. Usually, if the turning chain for the second row is considered a stitch, these 3 chain stitches we skipped when making the first row will also be considered a stitch. So we will make the second row's final stitch in the top chain stitch here. Yarn over. Insert the hook into the top chain stitch. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over again and pull it through the first 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over again and pull it through the remaining 2 loops on the hook. The final stitch is made and the second row is finished. When counting the number of the stitches in a row, remember to count the turning chain as 1 stitch. So here in the second row, there are 1, the turning chain as 1 stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 stitches in total. Working on the third row and beyond is similar to making the second row. You will turn your piece and make a turning chain. Using a stitch marker here is optional but recommended, especially when you are just getting started. Then yarn over, skip the first stitch of the row. Starting from the second stitch of the row, make 1 double crochet stitch into each of the stitches of the row. When approaching the end of the row, remember to work into the top chain stitch of the turning chain. Practice by making more rows with double crochet stitches. Stitch markers are helpful reminders to prevent you from missing a stitch or forgetting where to insert the hook. Similar to making half double crochet stitches, as you are making more rows, you might start to notice that there are holes on the side. This is because a turning chain is usually thinner than a double crochet stitch. When a turning chain counts as a stitch, the space between the turning chain and the real double crochet stitch next to it is larger than the spaces between each real double crochet stitch. So there will be gaps. Once you've made the desired number of rows, fasten off the yarn and weave in on it. Next, let's look into situations when a turning chain is not considered a stitch. Like before, these 3 V shapes represent the turning chain. And here, this is the first stitch of the row to work into, and this time we will work into this stitch because the turning chain does not count as a stitch. So we will make the first real double crochet stitch into here. Take the stitch marker off. Yarn over and insert the hook. One double crochet stitch is made. The next one will be made into the next stitch of the row here. Continue to make 1 double crochet stitch into each of the remaining stitches of the row. Now we've come to the end of the row. Usually, if the turning chain is not considered a stitch, these 3 chain stitches we skipped when making the first row will not be considered a stitch either. So we don't need to work into the chain stitch here and the second row is finished. Note that we are talking about general situations. Always check to see what a pattern specifies. Working on the third row and beyond is similar. No stitch of the row will be skipped in the beginning and no stitch will be made into the turning chain in the end. Using stitch markers in the process is optional, but they do help you see where the stitches are.